So it must have been pretty cold yesterday, when you went out to go.
That's
take
one.
a look at
That's
the
one
jump.
excuse. That's one excuse as to why I didn't do the jump yesterday. Which was last week's topic, was like getting over fear that we kind of. Well, it wasn't like our intended topic last week. It's just what we ended up spending the bulk of the episode talking about. We started from lesson plans, and then we kind of got into that with like the warming up to challenges sort of thing. So as you know, but people watching don't know, I've been spending the last couple months trying to go after some challenges that have been on my mind as challenges that I've wanted to do before, like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 4 years ago.
I feel like this one
Is longer.
You
This
were
is
looking
longer.
at for like at least a decade.
Yeah. So this is like a cat leap over cat leap or arm jump, depending on where you're from, over a parking entrance. And it would be the biggest one that I've done outside. I've set up things in the gym before, like way back, that, you know, just kind of testing, maxing out how far I can do like a level cat that actually were bigger, but it was so long ago that that's not even helpful to me at this point. And that's actually the big problem with this one, and why I've been out twice now with a camera guy and not been able to pull the trigger on. And I kind of knew, the thing is, yesterday I knew the day before that, like, it was, I had confirmed that we were going to go shoot, and I didn't actually think that we were going to shoot so soon. I thought I was going to have some more days to prep, but I've just been trying to like escalate my preparation for it. So just doing different challenges outside, doing different challenges at the gym, just things that are everything you should do. It's just that it just didn't work it out till enough time. And for me, with parkour and trying to, anytime I want to do something that's actually like mentally going to be a big push, it's always been like a slow, like meticulous process of like a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then eventually, sometimes what I like to do also is, and I think this is good if people that have access to gyms, is build up something bigger in the gym, because you can always build, when I say build up, like you can always use the movable structures that are in most gyms to build up something bigger, because having that in your back pocket is like, oh, even though I'm doing this cold here, like in the moment, in the spot, if you've done something bigger before, even if it's under like safer contexts or whatever, that's super powerful. And it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's just like the kind of like, I have these tools, so I'm going to use them. But I wasn't even really able to get to that level of preparation. And so this was like me just going to the spot, knowing that it is still just in my head. Like I know it's fully well like a jump I can do. I know I just have to press like the send button, but just standing there, even after doing all the stuff we said last week when we were talking about fear, like knocking out another thing first. Like we did a shot before that, and it required effort, and it required, building up to something, and then doing some warm up jumps, and then getting to the spot, and just, I think it was just I already had enough or not enough self-belief. Is what it came down to. And it says, we know, like the biggest thing in parkour, like if you were going to go far in parkour and be able to like keep pushing boundaries and stuff like that, it's all self-belief.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier, like you've done larger ones in the past, right? Like
in the gym, in the gym. Not right. This would be the biggest one I've done outside.
Right. Yeah. But like, experience is such a huge driver in like being confident with things, right? Some people just can send stuff without the experience, but oftentimes they are kind of viewed as reckless because then they don't have the skill to back it up. But a lot of times you need to build experience to be confident moving forward. But the experience has to be like pretty recent. Especially if it's like a sizable jump, right? Yeah. Like if it's like, because like, jump distance can fluctuate even on like a day-to-day basis. It's like, oh, I'm feeling like primed today.
That was like in my head. That was in my head too yesterday, because it's a standing takeoff, right? And I got like a little railing behind me too. I'm doing it off that little white box thing that you suggested. That kind of like ended up being the best way to do it. But still, it's like limited room for arm swing. There's just enough issues. The other thing was like, I was like, oh, if I could just take the drop, like in between the walls, but I can't. It's like a 9-foot drop, and I just don't know. even what that's going to feel like for me right now. But still, it's like, I know the deep logic of it is like knowing that it's only like a few inches more than I've done recently, and that it's going to feel like the same. Yeah. And the worst case scenario is like not a bad scenario at all. It's like, oh, I might slide down the wall, but it's just not enough to get over the instinctive fact of just being in front of a gap with some height and telling yourself like, jump at this thing. Right. Yeah. Which is parkour. Which is the more you do parkour, that's what a lot of challenges will be. You know, it could be doing like a dyno a couple stories like up, you know, off the ground, and, you know, repping it out as you've done in the past, like hundreds of times at a lower level until finally like, okay, I'm going to release my body way above the ground.
At a certain point, it's no longer a physical or technical game. It's a mental game, right? Like, because like, especially with a single move like this, it's like, you know, you've done a lot of preparation. You've done this skill thousands of times. Mm-hmm. You've, you know, maybe not in this scenario or whatever, but you've done this skill thousands of times so that you have the technique, you have the understanding there. You've built your body up physically. You're strong enough to jump that far. Mm-hmm. But it's the mental game, and the mental game is the hardest game of all the games, right? Like, because you could lift weights, get stronger, and be able to jump further. You can put the reps in and be able to do like, you know, thousands of attempts at, or thousands of tries of experience. You can build up the experience and learn the technique. But at a certain point, the mental game is just like, is the most challenging one to deal with. You're kind of always navigating uncertainty. And uncertainty is the biggest driver of fear, because you don't know the outcome is what the outcome is going to be. You're less likely to pull the trigger. You're less likely to press the send button. Yeah, and it's not just an email, you know. it's a jump with consequence.
That's a really good way to put it too. Is just the uncertainty, because there still was some uncertainty, and that's the problem. Even with like the again hitting the wall and sliding down, I was telling myself like, it's just going to feel like this, but there's a part of me that is like, what if it doesn't? Yeah, feel like that. And I think ultimately like it's two issues. Like, one is just like not having enough self-belief and that I'm going to be able to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. And so like letting myself down a little bit, just being in it. It would be like probably close to my max of what I'd be able to do, you know? So maximum physical effort required. Short notice sort of thing, so not as much preparation, which was already kind of getting to me. So I had a couple of, I guess we'll say like excuses like going into the day, but ultimately it was like, okay, camera guys lined up. I got to shoot this other thing too, and so let's just, you know, I just have to show up. And the crazy thing about this one is like I just have to try. Mm-hmm. Like if I try to jump, I'm going to get something out of it, and I couldn't try. And that's kind of what upsets me about it, is that, and I mean, I think I talked about this like last week, where it's like, I don't dwell on these things. Like I'm a pretty optimistic guy. So ultimately like I just go on with my day, and I'm happy today, and I was happy at the end of yesterday. But I was upset in the moment. I was definitely like to like have, it's been tricky because I think I've been like putting a lot of pressure on myself to try to do these things in a short amount of time right now, because I thought that I was going to be physically prepared to do these things by summer, and summer came around and like my knee still didn't feel great, and most of parkour was still really scary. Like I was showing up to like sessions and stuff like, oh, I haven't done a Kong in a while, and I've had so many Kongs that I've tried to do over the last couple of years where I couldn't even flex my knee properly, and so like I would clip a wall. Just stuff like that, where it's like coming back from an injury, that's the last thing that you get back is the mental. And it took me until like September really to feel like, okay, I can do some parkour. Right. And I was able to shoot a line with Daryl. I was able to get another one or two ticked off. But now it's on to like, oh, now I'm going to try to attempt the things that are like, would have been hard 2 years ago before I got hurt.
Before the injury, yeah.
So yeah, it's, when I put it that way, and again, these are like excuses building up. When I put it that way, it makes me feel good about myself, because it's like, well, you were trying to do something really hard, man. But ultimately, it's like, no, I know I can get this thing done, but now it's really winter.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, it was down to like 3 degrees yesterday, I think, which is like 36 degrees Fahrenheit, I think.
Yeah. I was standing around like putting on a hoodie or putting on a sweatshirt, taking it off to a t-shirt, putting back on the sweatshirt. Because I actually wanted to do it in a t-shirt because I felt like it woke me up more. And then there's, you got the public, I got people that were like getting invested, like pulling out their cell phones as I'm standing staring at this thing. So it's just, it wasn't a nice feeling. And I knew like we arrived and I looked at it and I'm like, oh, I think it's on. But it's every time I look at it, I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so we get set up to shoot it and then all of a sudden like it's not on.
Yeah.
And then I just know right away, like there's not much that I've been able to do in the past to really switch on in those scenarios. Because we talked about things like you can get someone to count down for you. That works sometimes. That
never works for me. I always like being in control of my own countdown.
Yeah, it works for me because I'll count in my head. I'll do a breath, stuff like that. It's really just, to me, I think it's like I don't know what the mechanism would be like neurologically for what happens, but I do think it's like a focus tool because I've used it on other people. I've used it on kids and they've been like surprised when it works. But it's almost like, I feel like when I do it for other people, I'll try to almost go through like a not like a hypnotic process, but kind of the same thing. Like, okay, I want you to do this. All right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand here. We're going to do this. You're going to hit one more prep. I'm going to go back. I'm going to start counting down from 5. And this has worked for people, and they've been like kind of surprised, but you almost need someone like that to like, because like they're like, oh, René's coaching me, and I trust him, so therefore this whole process is going to work.
I'm not a believer in countdowns. Not that it doesn't work, but that it's a huge crutch to like. Like if it's like, oh, can you give me a countdown? It's like, yeah.
If someone else sometimes asks for it, I have in recent memories. So there was a jump. Like right before I hurt myself, so like 2 years ago, there was a jump that I had been looking at for a while, and I did get someone just like, I was looking at it and I'm like, it was on, it was definitely on. So this is a different scenario than what I was facing yesterday, where it was definitely on. I didn't have a lot of distractions. I really believed in myself, and I'm just like, I need to go. I'm gonna go. Hey, can you just give me a 3, 2, 1 real quick? And I did it like, basically it's like before they even get to 1.
Yeah,
you've
already decided on commitment.
It's a focus setter where like you feel like the adrenaline rise, and then you like really get dialed in. You're like, okay, it's happening. And I didn't even ask for that yesterday because like that, I knew it wasn't really there.
Yeah, because you weren't ready to commit.
I felt like not only physically cold, but like just in my brain, it just started to bug me like emotionally, and like I'm not someone that's gonna like yell or start punching myself in the face to get something done, and those things just don't work for me. So
well, I mean, like, I'm not a big fan of countdowns personally. Like, I think it's like you're relying too much on external factors when you're going into that world. So like, I like people sometimes ask like, oh, do you want to count down? I'm like, no, like shut up. If anything, like let me like deal with my process and work through it. But not everybody's the same. So not everybody kind of works through the same way. But for me, I've always liked the control over like, okay, I'm going to count myself down. And when I'm feeling ready, I go. I'm not relying on any external forces, just my own. But I mean, fear is like such a big part of parkour, and it's like, I mentioned this earlier, but it's a big draw for what like interests me in parkour at this point. Yeah. Especially in my career now that I have a lot of experience with lots of different skills, and so the progression over the last several years for me has been purely mental. If anything, I've lost a lot of like physical capability. I can't jump as far. I can't do a lot of things that I was able to do years ago. But I feel, well, maybe not today, but within the last few years, I've been better at committing to things that historically would have been more challenging to do. So like the mental game is what's drawn me more into, like, it's been the more interesting part of parkour for me.
Yeah. It is interesting. I also think I just wanted to touch on that, just what you were saying a moment ago too about like you not enjoying it. I wonder how much different it would be if like you had a coach or mentor or training partner who helped with the process of commitment. Because I think it's not as unexplored in parkour, because I think you can see teams out there and groups of people that train together where they're able to like reach a level of encouragement where it really seems like, off of like video footage and reaction and stuff like that, where it really seems like there was like somewhat of a team effort to get the job done.
Yeah.
So
just the last clip in Dive Holes, like you were a big part of that process of like, cool. I was like, at a certain point I was like, yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. You were like, oh yeah, I think you got it. You know, you were kind of encouraging in that respect. And then I was like, yeah, you're right. I have to have this delusion that I can actually make it. And you're like, it's not a delusion. You can make it. And it was just like, yeah, I can make it, you know? And so, yeah, you were a big part of like getting me to do that. And you coached me through it and were involved in like getting me to the point of like commitment. Full commitment, because I was like partially committed for a lot of attempts there.
We were doing like a lot of video feedback too, and this is like a different challenge though. Like, and I mean, it's still the same thing, but it's like, this is a challenge where you're able to do preps. Like you're able to put in like preps.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, like, if it was like a dive where like you weren't even able to like,
where it's like go or nothing.
Reach the whole, like go or nothing.
I've done a few of those too.
Yeah.
And
it's a different game. I think this one was like, we were looking at like video clips, because you were like, okay, doing like different variations of preps, and it was like, okay, definitely looks like you can put more speed. You need to put more speed. You need to
push like through more on the first one. But I guess like the kind of looping back to what you're saying is like, if you had a team or a coach or like it all depends on what I'm interested in accomplishing, right? Is like Dive Holes was a big project of mine. It's the only thing I cared about doing in parkour. Like I'd show up to Sunday sessions. I'd do like parkour like casually, like I'll do challenge over here to challenge over here. But in the back of my mind is like, this project needs to get done, and I need to find cool, interesting lines or really hard dives to like accomplish. Same thing happened with Ascension 2, was like I was singularly focused on finding ascents that I wanted to accomplish that were challenging and unique and visually appealing. And so like single track mind towards accomplishing something. I think the same thing would be the case if I was training for competition, or if I was training for a different video, or if I was like, Team Fat trying to make vlogs every week or whatever, right? Like, or store, if I was in that scenario, I would be like, I would want to like have a group of people, or probably not a single person, probably a group of people who are like, like being my support pillars to like help me accomplish and rise above where I would be just by myself.
Yeah.
And that happened throughout Ascension 2 as a project, throughout Dive Holes as a project, like yourself, Wes, like other people that I surrounded myself with were like encouraging and like trying to build me up to do the things that I hoped to accomplish. And, but yeah, like now I don't have a video project. Yeah. So now I'm kind of like, I'm eager to go back to the drawing board. I'm dealing with a little bit of like tendinitis, and tightness, but I'm trying to work through that, and once I'm like healthy, I really want to start building my body back up. I want to be strong again. And then from there, maybe I'll start kind of moving into like more video projects or just things I want to start accomplishing. But it's been a while since I've done a lot of weight training, as you know, and like developing my output. Last night I was at Origin's Parkour Studio in Port Moody, and I asked Nathan how many muscle ups he could do in a row. And then he was like, oh, I don't know. I don't even think I could do 10 right now. And so he tried, and he actually got 9. And like there's a point in time where like he could do a ton in a row, and myself, I was able to do like 15 in a row at one point, and I did 2. And it's like, wow, like it's crazy, because like my climb ups are like probably better, like better than ever, but my like muscle up ability, that just shows how weak I am currently. Like I'm just not able to like pull as forcefully as I used to be able to. So
There's some technique there too.
there's definitely technique there, but I don't think it's the technique that's the problem. I think it's more that I'm just way weaker than I used to be. So yeah, I got to get my body back. So
let's do it. I'm also just trashed right now. That's been like the hard thing, and I don't know. I was really upset in the moment yesterday when I was trying to get the job done and not able to, and it's just like I kept like dwelling on other things, like I knew this wasn't going to work. It's just kind of like what I couldn't, it's like that was actually my worst fear. My worst fear was not getting hurt trying to do it. Like I had gone through this process of like, oh, if I jump and I get hurt, at least I jumped. I was accepting that, and I think it's something that, many people that try to do parkour at a certain level, you're taking risks and you kind of have to be okay with the outcome to take certain risks. And some people might be listening to this like, oh, that's not what parkour is all about for me. And it's like, that's cool. It is for me.
yeah.
So
It's a big part of parkour for me as well. It's like you're facing risk and you're trying to control it. You're kind of like, it's this like wild animal that you're trying to like put in a box. And sometimes you get cut, sometimes you get bit, but like at the end of the day, like you're trying, like you're ending up on top. You're the one that's actually controlling the scenario, not the wild animal, right?
Yeah.
And that's a weird analogy, but like that's what's super like enticing for me and a lot of people, I think, but maybe not for everybody.
Yeah. But that was my biggest fear was showing up yesterday, having Mateo there to film. Ollie even like he came late. It's his fault that I didn't get it. He was late. He showed up late. But just having people there, having people like having the whole thing like ready to go, and then just not being able to pull the trigger. That was actually what I was afraid of. And as soon as I knew that's what was happening, it just got worse.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem is it just, the whole moment got in my head.
And then I don't know if this happened, but then you linger.
Yeah.
And you're like still trying to force something to happen that's actually not there.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, it ends up being this like experience of like, well, now I'm wasting everybody's time. And it feels like, you start to like spiral downward, and then you're definitely not going to do it.
Yeah. So the whole like just kind of building up from where we ended off last week, we kind of talked about the process. We talked about like things to do on the day, things to go into if you're just going into a session, probably. So a session like this is harder because I'm going into the session like knowing I'm going to be attempting a difficult thing.
Yeah.
So I go through all the proper processes and stuff, and I still come to this point where I'm, unsuccessful. So what could happen there is a couple of things that could have made the situation better, which just kind of wanted to just touch on quickly here. So preparation, had I done things that were comparable to the challenge that I was trying to do, if it wasn't something new and unknown, and if I had some things to fall back on as like I've been here before, that would have helped. Didn't have that. Yeah. And then just the emotional place you're in, just the place you're in emotionally. It just so happened, just really, it actually wasn't the best day for me. It wasn't too many distractions, too many other things going on, and ultimately just didn't get the job done. If you are someone who's able to work through all of that and have enough self-belief, you're probably going to go super well with parkour. You're going to be able to go super far with it, or any athletic endeavor, really, because self-belief is ultimately what builds champions.
That's so true.
But anyways, we're talking about the reasons why we're doing parkour, like for us, like what's in it for us. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was really like selling parkour to people. Selling parkour to the masses, because most of the people watching here are people that already do parkour, and so they're kind of understanding the whole thing that we're talking about. But if like someone new to parkour were watching this, let's say you're listening in, and they'd be like, these guys sound like they're doing something really stupid. I don't get why they would be like willing to hurt themselves or throw themselves at a wall.
Well, it shows in a lot of like YouTube comments or Instagram comments or like anytime a parkour video gets shared onto like Sports Center or something like that, it's people who are like, oh, like gonna break his knees, or like, oh, well, that's a good way to roll an ankle, or like, yeah, oh, he's not gonna be able to walk by the time he's 50 or whatever, right? Like there's tons of like comments like this. It's people who don't understand the value of like risk taking, but oftentimes what's so funny about it is then they'll go to like a BMX video and be like, wow, this is so incredible, or like a skateboarding video, and it's like, holy crap, he has so much resilience. And I don't know if this is actually the same people, but you see like an interesting divide here is like people seem to understand other action sports or other sports in general and the risks that are involved in American football, for instance, right? But then they don't see the value or attraction towards doing parkour because they see it as super risky.
Well, one difference with, like, as you mentioned, American football, incredibly risky endeavor, but it has a big monetary payoff.
Yeah,
that parkour doesn't. So I think your general public is going to be more likely to respect and understand when someone is like, "Oh, I made $40 million this year."
It's the trade-off. Yeah, well, I might have gotten 14 concussions this year, but I've got $40 million.
I have a wealthy retirement ahead of me, and so people understand that because ultimately, like, you have people that, let's say someone has like a family to support. Yeah. Right. And so it's like, okay, what's going to get this person into parkour that has a family to support? And, we'll get into some things, but ultimately, like, the first thing they're seeing is like risky physical activity, and I have a family to support. Why would I do risky physical activity?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Why, Tom?
Because for the love. Yeah, for the love of movement and sport. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like, do you need, like, I think all people benefit from dealing with and facing risk, whether it's like super low to the ground risk or like obviously like way more extreme risk. But it's important for everyone's development. So like as you're growing up as a child, like you should be dealing with risks. Like you should be playing in a way that is not super dangerous, but has the risk of falling. Right? Because then you're going to be more resilient when you grow up. And even when you're older, you need to like be able to like manage those risks as well. Otherwise, you're just like putting yourself in a bubble and you don't grow from experience. And risk doesn't have to take the form of physical risk, right? You can have risk in other ways, like financial risk or social risk, right? If you never put yourself out there, if you never approach the girl, you're never gonna get a date. Like if you never, if you never like invest your money, you're never gonna get a return. Like if you just keep it all in your savings account, you're just gonna lose the value of your money to inflation. Like risk is a part of everyday life, and you need to be able to, and I just went really far away from parkour for a minute, but it's a part of life, so you need to like tackle it head on in order to grow, right? And that's the only way you can do it. So parkour is one of those avenues where you can learn to manage risk and do it effectively and then grow as a person as a result. So that's why there doesn't need to necessarily be a monetary payout for it, but because there's other benefits to doing parkour.
A quick note on that, because then we'll get into like parkour specifically, but just risk in general. It's similar to like what I've heard from like the fitness industry and like bodybuilding, is you have someone walk into a gym, and this is like what you'll get. This is what you'll get from anyone who thinks they're too old or like not in shape enough to do parkour or take on something like parkour that has risk. Is they'll be like, oh, I don't think I could do that. What you're doing. Like, Tom, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could do the things that I've seen you do in videos, the like whatever you're posting. I can't do that. Therefore, it's not for me to get into. And it's like, well, hold on a second. It's the same thing someone says to someone who's like a jacked dude. It's like they walk into a gym and they're like, oh, I just want to like work out a bit. I don't want to look like you. And it's like, well, you're not going to look like that guy by accident. You're not going to look like that guy like instantly. You may never, but also like it's just not going to like magically happen. So you're not going to get into someone who's starting parkour is not going to start taking on risks like you're taking on right away. And I think that's the idea they have often is when they look at the risky activity like parkour is like, in order to start, these are the things I'm going to be having to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not going to happen by accident. That's going to be like years of like dedication to get to this point. So let's just start out with like, can you touch your toes? Can you, can you squat down? Can you do a little jump? Let's start there. Let's just get you in. Let's start there. And then, I assure you that none of these things are going to just happen to you. You're not going to get to this situation like that. There's going to be work that gets put in that gets you there.
Yeah, it's like we're not gonna take you up to the rooftop on your first day. Like it's the same analogy that I always liked, which was if you're getting into martial arts, right? It's like you're okay, like your first day showing up. They're not gonna put you in a ring with Mike Tyson in his prime, right? That's not like how it works. Like you don't and
we got a new guy. Can you call up Mike?
Yeah. So it's this whole thing where like you're dealing with like extreme consequence when you reach the top level, but you don't reach the top level in your first day, first week, first month, first year, first 5 years in parkour. So yeah, like you're not going to tackle extreme risk very early on, and so when you see somebody doing parkour at a high level, you can't expect that that's what you're going to be doing, right? And so like a lot of our adult clients, they come in and they're like, yeah, I talk to my friends and they think I'm crazy because they have this perspective of what parkour is, and I'm telling them I'm doing parkour as somebody who's in my 40s or 50s, right? And it's like, okay, well, like, no, I'm not going up to rooftops and jumping off and like experiencing extreme risk all the time. I'm dealing with risk in my own way. What is risky for me? What is a manageable amount of risk for me is a different beast than the manageable amount of risk for Tim Champion or Ed Scott, Brody Pawson. The top level guys in the world are dealing with risk on a much greater, they have a much wider tolerance for risk because they're able to manage it way more than I am, or the 50-year-old student who comes in to a parkour class. So they're going to have a much smaller risk profile, I suppose. Yeah.
So once we get past the person's understanding of risk, understanding that like in order to take bigger risks, it takes time, it takes training. It doesn't happen by accident. You don't just show up and start doing these things. But then there's the other thing that people just don't get the point of parkour. We can talk about media. Like we have a lot of media out there that makes parkour very confusing.
Yeah, well, just parkour videos in general. It's like, what's the point of it, right? Like people often say like, oh, why don't you just walk around the wall? You don't have to jump over it. And yes, you can walk around it, but that's not the point of parkour. There's a whole purpose to doing a difficult thing when you can do a difficult thing. So when you're, what's the old adage? Is like when you're presented with two paths, like one is easy, one is hard, you choose the hard one, because you grow, because there's value in doing things more difficult, so that when you approach more difficult things later in life, you're more easily able to overcome them. So yeah, people don't understand the whole purpose of it. The media that comes out with parkour, a lot of it's just Instagram clips of people just jumping off of buildings, and so the people don't get what is the point of this.
Or even like doing like a style line.
Oh yeah,
that gets even particularly like certain trends with style lines too, where it's like, oh, this is is this dance? Is it like what's happening here? You know, you can just look at a thing like, okay, I saw like a roll on the ground, and I saw like a little spinny move over a wall, and then I saw a flip. Cool, flip. Yeah, nice. What was that other stuff? I don't get it.
What's the point? Why did he do the other thing? Yeah, so
it's almost like a harder sell to sell someone on the complete package of like freestyle is almost like a harder sell to someone that does it, because again, like you can survey a bunch of people and be like, who would like to learn how to do a backflip? And you get, you know, a lot of people be like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. It's like, who would like to do this? And you just like play a clip of like, I don't know, like maybe Ed's like winning run from like SPL 1 or something, you know, like play him like those highlights and be like, yeah, that part was cool. I don't really understand the rest of it, but I'm down for like the part where you did a backflip. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, so I have a theory around like media and parkour and what does well. Obviously, really extreme things do really well, like the dumb tomato diving front flips to like from, you know, 10 meters or whatever.
Yeah,
that does super well. But a lot of
big singular moves.
Exactly. And that's just because it's so extreme looking. It's like, wow, this is incredible. This is the highest level of whatever. Or like, oh, I want to see him landed on his face or whatever, you know, like that type of mentality around it. But then there's like, you know, you have Store who has how many subscribers now? 7, 8 million?
Over 7.
Yeah, so something like 8 million. Let's say 8 million subscribers on YouTube. And why do they have 8 million subscribers when like other parkour channels don't have anywhere near that? Or like some parkour some parkour YouTube channels are doing things like late to school POV or like Spider-Man in real life or Mario Brothers do you know whatever. And my theory is like putting parkour in a context helps people understand it and makes it more appealing to watch. And so in the case of like the POV videos of like late to school POV, well, it's like, okay, why is this person jumping over the wall? Because they're late to school. Why is this person climbing up this building? Oh, because it's Spider-Man. And it's like it's taking parkour as this skill set and putting it into the context of a scenario that the larger audience can understand. And I think the same is true for Store in that they do a great job of breaking down what they're doing and why they're doing it because they've been telling stories every week for the last 10 years, more or less, right? Yeah. So like they go into it and they're like, oh, we're trying to do this jump, and oh, he's like jumping next to the wall to see, and they break it down. And this isn't going to work for everybody because they just happen to be great storytellers at this point. And now to get onto Store's level, you have to start telling stories really well to the point where people, and not only tell stories really well, but do it with good parkour as well. So that's why I think they're so successful is the storytelling. People kind of can get engaged in their content and understand why they're doing it and then be amazed at what they're doing as well. So that's my theory.
I think for one, and I'm not trying to throw shade at Store or anything, but I don't think they're great storytellers. I wouldn't go that far. I think they've been really consistent. I think they perform at a really high level. They have guys on the team like Toby Seeger, who's like I think he really helped push the brand like early on through like Ninja Warrior performances and stuff, and then also just consistently over time, like they're following through Parkour built, and then through that, you know, they reach other audiences.
So yeah, I agree. Consistency is a big part of it. But like, name a better storyteller in parkour right now.
Mathieu from Quebec. This is off the top of my head.
He's a better storyteller.
Look at his Instagram. Look at his Instagram.
That's different platform. So Bob Reese. So here's the thing. Bob Reese, Mathieu. Yeah.
Hold up. Before you before you go to Bob Reese and other people. So one point I wanted to make too is Store does not do any of that stuff on Instagram.
Yes.
And they actually like they kind of hate on like here and there hate on people that do that kind of stuff on Instagram. Like I think they're actually like opposed to it, like to the narration, to the voiceover, to whatever. And I don't know why, because they do it on YouTube all the time, where it's like, but for some reason there's like this resistance in parkour to people that are using Instagram as a platform to tell a story, versus like, no, Instagram's just where you dump your clips, bro.
Well, this is why I think Bob really revolutionized the use of Instagram for storytelling and parkour, and that's again why is Bob successful on Instagram? Because of the storytelling. He's like, okay, I could just post this cool clip that I did, or I could tell people how I did this cool thing, and then that's way more appealing and like and creates much more of a draw towards his content, because now I'm not just seeing cool move after cool move, and as I swipe, I'm like, wow, that was cool, that was cool, that was cool. I don't understand any of these things because I don't do parkour. Now I'm like, oh, he's trying to do this. He's building up to it by doing this, this, and this, and now this is him actually succeeding at it. And he just told me how his whole process was, and he did it in a fun, like, upbeat kind of way that makes me feel good at the end of the video, because oh, he accomplished it, cool, I can move on to the next one, right? So Mathieu is similar way. He's creating really interesting content on Instagram, but going back to his YouTube, he created a successful YouTube as well, doing Mario and Luigi
which
stuff.
were stories, like, and I think his focus was actually storytelling. And again, using different themes.
But would you rather watch a store video, or would you rather watch a Mario and Luigi?
100%, but I do parkour.
Yes.
Right. But in terms of like reaching other audiences who don't do parkour, I would put money on that Mathieu's audience through like Nitro Parkour has more people that don't do parkour than store.
Interesting. Well, we don't know that for sure.
No, we don't know. But I would put money on that bet.
Yeah.
I think that's a smart bet.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure how many followers or subscribers Mathieu Nitro Parkour has.
They're in the at least 4 million, I think, last time I checked. But
store has more than
total
double.
But again, I think it's like more people that are actually like.
But a lot of people don't do parkour that are store subscribers. Yeah, like it was a regular occurrence when I was in England that people would come up to like the group that I was with, which included Callum, and was like, "Are you guys store?" And I was like, "Well, that guy over there is."
So my difference between when you say storyteller is, to me, that's not story. They've done through consistency, through performing at a high level, through like a good video production, just like. This is a cool thing that's happening. This is a cool thing that's happening. Look at this big move, right? Over time, is character development and character attachment. So
I think it's both. I agree. I agree, because I know exactly what you're saying here, because like you've got, Callum, he's like the silly guy who's always like next to Sparta, and you've got Toby, who's like a skilled like climbing kind of character who's like. And then you've got like Benj, who's like really sticks things really well, and you've got Max Cave, who's always into finding the tic tac lines, and you've got like all this cast of characters, but the cast of like every week they are telling some kind of story with that set of characters, right? Like, oh, who can hang off this bridge for the longest?
Those types of videos, those are because it's like, here's a challenge. It's going to be pretty easy for people to understand, and so we're going to do it. And they actually dialed into that as being like, okay, we got to do more of these videos.
The water challenges, the hanging on the bridge, the quick stand. But then you can go back to even further, is actually when they ended up getting demonetized, was they were doing a lot of POV chases, right? And so again, it's like, I mean, they did one kind of recently at the abandoned prison. That was like zombies was that? No, it was a prison escape video. Yeah. And they did another one that was like a zombies one. And again, it's putting it in context. They're telling some kind of story around it. And I would argue that they actually have the best POV videos of any of these YouTube channels.
again, like defining best is hard. I think
that prison one was excellent. Like,
yeah,
super cool.
but they also got like invited into that and stuff. Like, so I don't know. Yeah, best. Yeah. In terms of like video production, Mathieu does some cool shit with like graphics and stuff that like no one else does.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
So I gotta give him props.
I don't really watch.
No, you don't. Like
really
none
watch
of
his
us.
content.
No one really does.
I watch his Instagram, but that's
yeah, no one really does. But talented dude, and he's making it happen. So, yeah, good for him.
Cool. So yeah, like in just to kind of wrap this up here, you know, I think people don't understand parkour, and so sometimes putting it into context is really important. Actually, one thing that drew me to parkour originally was the original concept of parkour, which is this reach escape thing. And then I had visions of like Jackie Chan, and it's like, oh, like I can look at like Jackie Chan's movies and understand like he's basically doing parkour in a lot of these scenarios. So that's appealing to me. And the story that I told myself, or the story that I read about of David Bell, and like this whole idea of like be strong to be useful so that you can get places fast and save a cat from a tree or escape from a burning building. It was the story that I built around parkour that drew me into it. And it's not, and so yeah, like a lot of kids will come to the gym and they'll be like, I want to learn a backflip. And then we like sell them on like doing kongs and jumps and other things that are more parkour oriented or like traditional parkour oriented. And then they get super into it because then it's this whole experience of like, I can find challenges, I can grow, I can do things that are difficult. But that's actually another element of selling to somebody, right? It's like you have to like, maybe they're a lead, they come in and they're just, oh, I want to do a backflip, but then there's more to this whole thing that we have to tell them about. And then it's like, okay, they could just learn the backflip and leave, and they're like, I just did my backflip, I've got it. Or they could stay because we've sold them on all these other skills that they can develop as well.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if I wrapped that up, but
no,
I just opened up another box.
I mean, it is like a big thing to cover, and I think just leaving everybody with like something here, because again, we're assuming most people watching are parkour practitioners who sometimes get frustrated because they're not reaching a certain audience. And I think I would say like if you're truly the best, it has to be easily identifiable that you're one of the best, because we can assume that someone who's like very gifted, very talented is going to have a higher following than someone who's not. But even that alone isn't always enough, because if the context isn't there. So for example, like you could do a massive lache to precision, and that might pick up like that video, that piece, you put that out there, you send that out there, and it might pick up. It also might not, because it's like a singular clip, and if it doesn't have any context of like, again, why is this guy swinging from this bar? If you performed it well, therefore it looked easy. It's like, okay, that looked easy. Yeah. I don't understand why it's hard. Throw in a bail or two, throw in a miss or two, or a preparation, all of a sudden you have a story. Yep. And time after time, people refuse to do this. And I'm losing sympathy for people that can't make a success out of themselves because of parkour, because it's a niche sport. Not many people do it. Not many people are going to understand it. Not many people that even do parkour. If you do something and you make it look easy, people that do parkour aren't going to be able to grasp like how difficult it was. So you got to be able to like get them into this. Unless
you're doing something so like high level that it's like obvious, like Kong gainer precision, how rare of a skill that is, right? And if you're doing that, then people who do parkour are going to be like, wow, this is cool, even if you don't show bails.
Yeah.
But
even, I don't know, like even sometimes like that might not even catch like the amount of attention that someone might want. But yeah, like if you're consistent, like a team like Store over time, who for the most part, they're consistent with like actually doing parkour, like parkour is the main attraction, but then they throw in other things to make it relatable. You mentioned like water challenges, that's easy. I get it. I don't have to pretend that the floor is lava. The floor is water.
Yeah.
You know, these
There's
guys
a risk
are
of falling in.
They're trying to do this thing. When you get into stuff like, okay, we're trying to go over water, but we also have to stick the edge, and the edge happens to be on this 4-foot block. Now it's not understandable again. You know,
Yeah.
why are we sticking stuff? Why do we do it, guys? Because it's a part of parkour. It's a part of like increasing the challenge.
It's a part of demonstrating control.
Yeah, control.
And control over risk,
Yeah.
right? Getting that wild animal in the box.
Yeah. But you know, you stick a rail at height, you stick a rail over water, it makes sense. You do it on a railing that's at ground height, it doesn't really make sense to a lot of people, and they're going to be scratching their head. It's like, why did this look stupid? Why did this person jump to this rail? I don't get it. And yeah, sometimes it's our job to do things. We didn't mention a guy, John Dre Jones does a ton of like narration of like, what's cracking, guys? I wanted to do this jump here to this thing here, and sometimes goes into a bit of detail. So I think if you're not willing to do those things, ultimately you could be putting tons of effort into like social media or whatever and not getting the following you want. It is what it is. It doesn't actually matter how incredible the people that are in the culture think you are. You're not going to be attracting more people if you can't put it into a context that they understand.
Yeah. Well said.
All right.
Okay.
Should we end there today?
I think we should.
Okay.
All right. If you liked what we were talking about today, please give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and leave us a comment. What do you want us to talk about next time?